I'm Rick Dadarian, and you're listening to Realms of Memory. In May 1980, the city of Gwangju in South Korea erupted in violence. Shocked by the brutal suppression of student protests against the threat of renewed dictatorship, the citizens of Gwangju, South Korea's sixth largest city, seized weapons, formed their own army, and liberated the city from government control. The euphoria created by this victory against authoritarian rule was short-lived. Less than a week later, with tacit American approval, the military returned with more men, weapons, and hardware. Within a matter of hours, they crushed the uprising, killing hundreds and wounding thousands in the process. Beyond the lives lost or injured, Seoul National University professor Hae-ran Shin argues that the Gwangju uprising stunted the development of the city and the lives of its citizens. State leaders directed development funds to other regions, and major South Korean businesses were reluctant to invest in Gwangju and the surrounding Jeolla region. Although the Gwangju uprising came to be seen as a key turning point in the struggle for democracy, its citizens were long stigmatized as opportunists, traitors, and even North Korean sympathizers. The decision to select Gwangju as the site for a major international art exhibition, or what became known as the Gwangju Biennale, was an attempt to use culture to address the city's development needs. To explore the challenge of reconciling the need for urban development with the desire to preserve the memory of Gwangju's difficult past, we'll be talking with Hae-ran Shin about her book, The Cultural Politics of Urban Development in South Korea, Art, Memory, and Urban Boosterism in Gwangju. Hae-ran, thanks for taking time for this episode of Realms of Memory.
My pleasure.
So I wanted to start with just a question about how you got interested in the topic of the book.
Right. Well, it was 1995. I heard the news that the city of Gwangju is going to host a biennale, which is a high art exhibition. It's an international event. And then I was wondering, and then I was not the only one, because at that time in the 1990s, the whole country, South Korea, was hosting just very few international events. And then if that happened, always it was Seoul, the capital of the country. And then why Gwangju? And then to us, Gwangju was a kind of a symbol of a democratic movement. And then Gwangju, we understood that Gwangju had been undergo kind of a discrimination and then disadvantages of urban and regional development. So the news came to me as a surprise. So I became curious what was going on. And then I started working on the case.
So you have a major cultural event in a country where there really haven't been many of these to begin with, and then you have a kind of small town where this is selected to host this particular event. So that has its own unique political history. So it's just a question mark. Why would that town be selected for this event that you think normally would be held in the capital?
Yes. And then Gwangju was it belongs to those six six biggest cities. However, among those six, Gwangju was always kind of the last one. And then its development, economic development, cultural development really didn't receive attention because regarding Gwangju, what people remembered was always the memories of May 18, which took place in 1980. And then the traumatic memories and the political struggles were still going on in the 1990s. So
I think you mentioned that May 18th is the most significant historical event in modern South Korean history. So
Yes.
why is that event so significant?
Well, there was a little bit. There has been a democratization movement before May 18. However, it was highlighted in Gwangju, and then it. I heard that I understand that it started as just a peaceful, college students demonstration against military dictatorship. Yeah, and then. However, the police responses, no, the state's response was different. Maybe because there was already the perception that Gwangju and then Jeolla region, the Jeolla region that includes Gwangju is a province, yeah, and Gwangju and Jeolla province had been considered as resistant, and then kind of non-elitist areas. So maybe that's why the military dictator government sent national troops to suppress the demonstration. And then that's why the physical violence was really significant, and then lots of people were hurt and then killed and tortured.
So you have student demonstrations in the city in southwestern Korea.
Right.
And the government responds in a very heavy-handed way, right, to these student demonstrations, and that seems to that triggers like a larger uprising in the city.
Yes, so of course those citizens were really surprised, shocked, and upset, and so they organized a citizens' army. So it became really national troops versus citizens' army struggles. So, and the citizens' army were fighting quite well, and then the national troops they will hold, and then at that moment for about a week, citizens have a really peaceful and democratic community, which is well known. So it was a part of the pride that the Gwangju citizens have regarding May 18. But then on May 18, the national troops they gave a final warning, and because those citizen soldiers were concentrated in the previous Jeolla South Provincial Hall, and then the national troops warned that, so you can come out now or you will be killed. And then they actually killed many citizens.
And there are a few hundred citizens that end up getting killed, right, during this uprising.
Yeah, the record is debatable, and then it's like 300 to 2,000 according to different.
So this, what begins as student demonstrations, ends up being an entire city rises up against the state, and what is able to push out state authorities for a short time before you get to May 18th, and that's the final showdown where you get several hundred people who die.
Who died, and then at that time, any mobility in or out of the city was not allowed, and then the media was not allowed to talk about it. So the city was really isolated, and then not many people knew about it. And actually, because Korean media were quiet about it. Actually, international media reporter secretly, secretly entered the city, and then the German one, he talked about it, and that's how people knew about it. And later, more and more records were revealed.
But I think
So
isn't the significance of what happened on May 18th? It's also part of there's a larger backlash to this within Korea, right? This sets the country in a direction towards democracy and the end of military one-party rule.
exactly. And then especially activists and college student activists, and then, other activists, they secretly shared the news about it. And then that's why it became even bigger news. And then I remember that in 1989, I was a college student, and then there was a video watching about this, what happened in Gwangju, and then even the TV was the video was not clear, but anyway, people were bleeding, and then people were being beaten up, and then and so on. Then I remember that we were watching it in a small television, in a student's lounge. And then the soldiers or police people came into the campus because it was not allowed for people to watch it, although it was really what happened.
So am I understanding correctly? You're watching coverage of what happened in 1980 and 1989 as a student?
Yes.
And you're saying it wasn't allowed to watch it then, or in 1989, or
Yes.
just still at that point in time?
Still, yes.
So a lid was kept on what happened for a long time. And what I thought was interesting is that you talk a lot about how not only was the event silenced in terms of coverage of it, but it was cast in a particular political way, and the city was labeled in a particular way. Could you talk about that? How was the city, and how were the people of Gwangju labeled by the government?
Well, it was the label is strongly associated with the city's image, and then like negative image. I think the government, the military government, and the media all together have described the city as the city of resistance and the rebels, and then opportunist, and even North Korea related people. So they were arguing that people in Gwangju are really rebellious and then opportunistic, and they always betray people, and they resist against anything. And then they are related to North Korea because some of them were really North Korean spies. So, but unfortunately, even now, some extreme right-wing people from time to time argue that there were North Korean spies among those people who participated in the Gwangju May 18 demonstration.
Okay, so this part I thought was fascinating, is that I didn't realize the extent to which the shadow of the Korean War, it really, how far that goes into the present. And so you're mentioning in the case of Gwangju, well, one way to delegitimize what happens is to cast them as traitors, to cast them as being in league with North Korea. And I think you
Yes.
mentioned that was like the worst thing that you could do, to label somebody as working with North Korea.
First of all, the labor of North Korea, North Korea is North Korean related is a really dangerous one. So because people know that you can go to prison and then you can be jailed for many years just because of that. Right, because now even now the Korean Peninsula is technically at war, so it means that North Korea is it's complicated, but according to the constitutional law, North Korea is not a country; it's an anti-governmental organization. So if I were related to North Korea, it would mean that I work for anti-government organization. So it is really dangerous, scary labor. But still, people argue that. And then although the May 18 special law regulates for such argument, people still talk about it.
Okay. So on the one hand, what happened in Gwangju, it gets silenced. The people get stigmatized as being North Korean sympathizers, but possibly traitors. But also what I thought was interesting is that it's this memory of the Korean War that has a major impact on the priorities in South Korea.
Yes.
And that you really can't understand the emphasis on economic development really at all costs without without understanding how the war affects the psyche, maybe of the leadership of the state, or maybe the society in general.
Yes, it's a very good question. Well, right now, I'm not sure how much I would say that how much the Korean War affected the Korean society. But at least I think the effect of the Korean War is everywhere. Maybe it is quite embedded, in the Korean culture. So fast economic development was strongly driven by the national government, and then they usually ideologically use the existence of North Korea. So in the 1970s, actually North Korea was better off than South Korea, and then there was a rivalry between North Korea and South Korea. Well, North Korea supported by Russia, and then South Korea supported by the U.S. economically, and then those dictators and even later civilian governments really aggressively pursue the economic development and national economic development. And for that, they instrumentalized urban development, planning, banks, and even private businesses. So the mentality was that for national economic development, we should do something, So I remember when I was a kid, my teacher one day told us that he pointed out that we are not working hard, we are not studying hard enough, and then he said that if you don't study hard and if you are not smarter than North Korean children, and they will attack us, they will kill every one of you. So we were really scared, I remember.
That's interesting, because I think that would really surprise most people today, because used to news stories about how impoverished North Korea is, to learn that in the 1970s there was a real economic competition and a fear that maybe the South might lose out to the North, right?
Yes.
And that seems to drive a lot of the policies of the leadership, right? It's the military that takes over, right? In 1961, and the emphasis is more on economic development than democracy. Do they see that as like a life or death struggle for the country?
Yes. So, including May 18, demonstration, democratization activities and the democratic movements were strongly criticized to be against national benefit. So that was a strong ideology, and then plus the North Korean link. Yeah, it was a scariest one.
One of the things I thought was interesting was, on the one hand, you have this emphasis that you're stressing on this life or death struggle between South and North Korea, and the military seems to take charge. They feel like they're the only ones that can really win out in the struggle, promote development, and they do. South Korea is modernized dramatically during that period, and a lot of the companies that we associate with the South Korean success stories, Samsung and LG and on, are really products of that particular era. And what I thought was interesting is that Gwangju, not just in 1980, it's not just affected by what happens because of 1980, that even before that there are older regional histories that explain why it was neglected during this time where the government is really promoting development. And one of the big themes in your book is the importance of regionalism, right? And you stress that there are important regional tensions within Korea, and primarily between this province where Gwangju is located and a neighboring province that a lot of South Korea's leaders during this period of one-party rule come from, that caused them to look at Gwangju with a lot of suspicion. And even though they're emphasizing development in the rest of Korea, Gwangju was kind of left out of that to a large extent.
Yes. Well, I think there are several factors. So it was they were all combined together. As you said, Jeolla and Gwangju region didn't really achieve the economic development like based on the manufacturing industries, because the region traditionally was an agricultural area, and then so manufacturing industry developed, and they were concentrated in Gyeongsang region, and then those military dictators happened to come from that region, Gyeongsang region. So
well, was that intentional? Were they favoring the region where they came from?
I'm not sure, but Gyeongsang region have produced maybe more elites, more military and academic elites, and then so they were strengthening the unbalanced development. And then it has been always argued or debated whether or not it was intentional, the unequal development. But anyway, the consequences of those elite groups, the leadership, and then the agriculture versus manufacturing, the traditional industries, and then this democratic movement was that Gwangju and Jeolla region were always less developed than Gyeongsang region. But here, now the situation is Gyeongsang or Jeolla doesn't really matter much because all developments are concentrated so much in Seoul area.
So everybody's disadvantaged by comparison to Seoul, you mean?
Exactly. So even in the 1990s, when people were talking about Jeolla or Gyeongsang, and then regionalism, negative regionalism against Jeolla region, I thought that maybe strongest regionalism is about Seoul and non-Seoul. Anyway, that is a background. But regarding the disadvantages of Jeolla, people are saying that there are two states, like a nation state. One is the government, the state, and then the other one is Samsung. Samsung is the symbol of big corporations, so-called chaebol in South Korea, and it's because big companies and small companies, even small companies, were reluctant to locate themselves in Gwangju because, and even if they did, they didn't put the name of Gwangju or the name of Jeolla in the company's name because they thought that it will bring kind of prejudice and then disadvantages.
So if Gwangju is disadvantaged historically, this is just compounded by May 18th, that after this, it's labeled as a traitorous area. Companies, major corporations are reluctant to invest. And I think you stressed, too, that this really affects people's life opportunities and possibilities, too, in significant ways.
Right. And then I think it's interesting because back in the 1990s, there was a saying that if you bring marriage partner from that region who is from Gwangju or from Jeolla, your parents wouldn't like it, and if your parents are from Gyeongsang region, they will freak out because they believe that people in those areas are not really good people. However, now you can still see that kind of a comment, that kind of a negative, and then negative comments based on no evidences on the internet. Internet. In blog or newspaper article commentary section and so on. However, now it is much weaker, but it doesn't mean that kind of prejudices or negative image is gone. I think that 조선족 who are like ethnic Koreans whose ancestors moved to China and then who were raised in China and then moved to South Korea to work, mainly to work. 조선족 or North Korean defectors or like international migrants replaced the Gwangju people.
So they found other people to be suspicious of.
Yes. So I thought that because the Korean population is ethnically rather homogeneous compared to many other countries. So there was no racism or ethnicity controversies, and then no hate crimes and regarding that. So that is why regionalism was quite strong, and then the mainly Gwangju and Jeolla people were the main target, and then now it is not that strong because we have other minorities.
Okay, so you have this event of May 18th that takes place, and this, as as stifling as it is to the city, and it continues to hurt development in the city, it eventually sets in motion the democratization of South Korea. That happens by the end of the 1980s. You have the first really fair presidential elections. Then you have the first non-military president by the time you get to the early 1990s. And efforts are made to try to change the memory or to change the image of the city, right? I think you already mentioned there's this May 18th special law. What was that special law? May 18th special law in 1995 was one example.
Right. Yes. And then the first civilian government, one of their major tasks was to compensate for the May 18, and then because they wanted to differentiate themselves from military government, and then the military governments the May 18 was one of the major events that the military government was criticized for. So the civilian government, legalized this May 18 special law, and then according to the law, victims were financially compensated, and what victims were figured out, and then how many were killed and how many were missing and injured, tortured, and so on. And then they were financially compensated. And I think the law doesn't allow those rumors, negative rumors to be spreaded.
Okay. And around the same time, you have this cultural event that's taking place. Is it pronounced biennial? Biennial?
Yes, every 2 years.
So there's this major cultural event, and the city is selected. And like you said, this is what drew you to the topic to begin with. Why would this smaller city be selected for this big cultural event, and why was it selected?
I think it was the president's gesture for the compensation of May 18. However, this specific, I'm saying that they have that there was that kind of intention. However, this particular event, the decision making was kind of accidental and then complicated. I learned later. Because it wasn't Gwangju at first, because somebody was against the decision making. However, the city of Gwangju lobbied quite actively, and then you have to understand that it is not like a given externally only, because at that time, around this in the 1990s, Gwangju elites, the financial, economic, and the political, and then academic elites, they got together because they were so concerned about the regional development, because it was not really happening. So they shared the ideas why the regional development is what kind of a problem regional development faced. And then according to the survey they organized, they asked some like 3 different universities in Seoul and then Gwangju to do the respondents say that the Gwangju's image is quite negative and then political, and it was called as the city of blood, yeah, and then the political image was the barrier of the economic development. It was the conclusion. So that's why they tried to do many things for regional development. And then one of them is to host to host this event, Biennale, the international art exhibition. And at that time, like a city government and the regional government, they restarted the election. Before city mayors were, appointed by the national government, and then the election started. So it means that, like elected mayors and governors, they became more entrepreneurial than before, not just managerial. It means that they wanted to actively and proactively host events, and then they pursue some special programs for economic development and so on. So all these factors come together in 1995. When there was opportunity of hosting the Biennale, the city of Gwangju, those elites really tried to lobby for that host.
Okay. So there's concern among the local elites about the need for Gwangju to develop more. It's been left behind for a number of years. And there's talk about this big cultural event. So they see that as an opportunity. And at the same time, like you mentioned, the country is decentralizing. You have elections now for local officials, the mayor in particular. They're looking for opportunities to develop the city too. So they see this as a good opportunity for the city. So these people who are pushing for this event, do they necessarily care about the memory of what happened, integrating the memory of what happened in May 18th? And that's kind of the focus of your book is, well, how do these things intersect? These elites who, whether business people, the mayor, who are concerned about the development of the city, and then also you have this memory of what happened in the past. How do you reconcile the two? When they're lobbying for the cultural event, is that one of their concerns? Or is that just something that arises later on?
Well, later, because those people saw the result of the survey that the political image and was the barrier of Gwangju's economic development. So of course they didn't mean to care about May 18 or memories of May 18, anything related to that as a part of the Gwangju Biennale. It was opposite. They tried to remove that image, and then maybe it was a reflection of the intention, or just it was accidental. But the first the winner artwork of the first Gwangju Biennale was titled "To Forget." So
that's funny.
yes, so I can imagine that people really upset by the news, and then one famous singer made a song because of that. Because he later on, I think it was just some years ago, he later on said that he made a song remembering his song was titled "Remembering," to be against the winner artwork. Yeah. So maybe, I mean, the artwork was not, of course, not to say that to forget May 18, but just that the title "To Forget" provoked people. And then, that's, and plus the city government, tried too much to achieve like a big audiences, and then because it was their main target, they wanted to have a successful event, successful Gwangju Biennale in 1998, 95. So they mobilize, people, students, and then the elderly, and then, officials, and then city officials, friends, and so on. So they did have a big audience. So in terms of the audience number, it was successful. However, local people, especially those artists and civil society members who cared about May 18, they were not satisfied at all. And then they were critical, very critical about the mobilization of people, instrumentalization of artwork for the urban development. So they organized an, anti-biennale.
So they organized their own kind of counter event, right?
Yes.
And you stress too that they do it at a very particular place, right? There's a specific location. What's the significance of the place they choose to have this counter event?
They chose Mangwol-dong. Mangwol-dong was the cemetery for the May 18 victims. And then because those victims were just killed and then, on the street and so on, and even carrying them and burying them was not allowed. So at that time, victims' families, relatives, and friends, they secretly carried those dead bodies to Mangwol-dong. And then those pictures of them doing it, and then the stories are really sad. So Mangwol-dong has become the very special place for activists, political activists, and then anybody who cared about democratization and May 18. And then those anti-biennale organizers, they chose this place as an exhibition site.
So this cemetery was really like a prominent site of memory connected to that, what happened in May 18th, and it was a place where pro-democracy advocates, right, would make pilgrimages to, right, to remember the past and to call for a different future.
Yes. So, well, on the one hand, they the choice elaborated, what happened in 1980, and then why this history is still important, why people are still traumatized by what happened. And on the other hand, the political image, political color of the place has also slightly changed, like culturally and artistically, because it was used as a art exhibition place. So people, those visitors, realized that those cemeteries made a really excellent art exhibition. Yeah. And at the same time, the art exhibition made the cemetery like a differently special. So I think it was a really good choice. And then I visited there, and then there were many people, and then those people who couldn't understand the history, in details, asked me others, many questions.
And I think you mentioned too, this anti-biennial, this counter event ends up becoming even more successful than the biennial, than the what's supposed to be the premier event. It ends up drawing even more people.
It was most successful. It without mobilization, it had biggest audiences.
Okay, so if the memory of May 18th is left out of the first biennial, but it's included in this counter exhibition, this anti-biennial, what happens in years afterwards? Because this is an event that takes place every 2 years, right? And it's still continuing.
It's still continuing.
How do things change? Is there recognition of the concern of people in Gwangju that this memory of May 18th needs to be included in the event? Is there an effort to respond to that?
Right. I thought at that time that this anti-biennale will be great like a pair of the Gwangju Biennale. However, unlike my expectation, they would. I mean, the anti-biennale was just immediately integrated into the main biennale. Because the director of the anti-biennale was appointed as the director of the Gwangju Biennale, the main biennale. And then when that happened, anti-biennale people, I think they made a big compromise, quite easily, because later I realized why, by conducting interviews, they were afraid. They were afraid if they would hurt, or their anti-biennale the event would hurt the Gwangju's fortune. So, for example, this Gwangju Biennale was a rare opportunity, yeah, and then their city finally had, and then they were really afraid to spoil it.
Okay, and I think this is this is the focus of your book, that you have this intersection of concerns about the economic development of the city, and also the memory of what happened in the past. These things come to a head with this first event in 1980, and the two events that go off in very different directions. One ignores the past, one focuses on it, and then as the event takes place again, they're integrated. The two are integrated, but I think you're saying that those people who took part in the counter event, who are concerned about preserving the memory of May 18th, eventually they don't want that to overshadow the success of the event, right? That that economic concerns override concerns about preserving the memory of that past.
Exactly. I think that their patriotism towards Gwangju was also product of May 18, because they have been under the discrimination and investigation on May 18 was going on for a decade, and then so they, as a result, they have created a kind of Gwangju's a strong collective identity. So the idea that they have to protect their city was strong, as much as they were critical about any bureaucratic and then non-democratic administration and management. So they were on the one hand, they were critical about what the city government did, how the city government organized the event. But on the other hand, they wanted to contribute rather than, hurt the event.
Okay, so is it fair to say they were concerned if they pushed this political memory agenda too far, they were afraid that maybe this event would just go someplace else. The government might place it someplace else. I mean, it was fear in the end that got them. Everyone was concerned about the economic development of the city, but that became more of a priority out of concerns that they didn't want to lose the event.
Yes, and then the thing is that the event was a national project. So it means that funding and even people are from Seoul, the national government. So it means that if local people are hurting the event too much, they imagined that it is possible that the national government can take the money and people from Gwangju and then go to somewhere else. And it is still going on in South Korea because the nation state is quite powerful and it still drives urban and regional development pretty much.
Okay. So you have this biennial event that happens in 1995, and as you mentioned, it still continues into the present. And so has May 18th just completely disappeared over that time period, or is it just been watered down?
Well, actually, the anti-biennale event brought about a huge impact on the nature of the biennale. There were several occasions when people outside severely criticized the Gwangju Biennale, and then every time the nature of it and then the organization of the administration and then the members of the Gwangju Biennale have been changed. So later, artists and civil society members entered the Gwangju Biennale events, and then they worked as staff. So Gwangju Biennale over time gradually have become integrated with May 18th. So it was quite interesting that the image of the value and the image or artwork of related to May 18 have been increasing, and then now is people take it for granted that the Gwangju Biennale is quite critical about what is going on in the society. And then it has political messages. And then May 18 is obviously related to some of the artworks.
So do you see it as a success story in the end, where they found a balance between creating this event that draws people to the city, puts the city on the map, makes it into a cultural place, cultural destination, but at the same time, they're preserving the memory of their past?
Yes. However, the process was not really smooth. People, as I said, the people, those critical people enter the structure of the Biennale. They worked together, and then you can imagine that those bureaucrats who were, explicitly instrumentalizing culture and art, and those artists, popular artists, and then civil society members, they had such different work styles. Yeah, so they worked together for the Gwangju Biennale. It was painful, according to them. And then they both groups said that they were really angry and then shocked by such different people, and then they complained a lot about each other. However, over time, although those bureaucrats were not same people, because they were according to the Korean bureaucracy system, the people were changed every 2 years or so. Still, newcomers heard about what happened, and then they learned how to work with artists and civil society members. So the atmosphere became better gradually.
Heiran Shin, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me on your Sunday morning. I really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it.
Heiran Shin is a professor of human geography at Seoul National University. I've been talking with her today about her book, The Cultural Politics of Urban Development in South Korea, Art, Memory, and Urban Boosterism in Gwangju. Next month, we'll turn to the memory of militarized prostitution under Japanese rule during the Asia-Pacific War, with a particular focus on the less studied case of Indonesia. I'll be talking with University of Melbourne professor Kate McGregor about her book, Systemic Silencing, Activism, Memory, and Sexual Violence in Indonesia. If you've enjoyed this or other episodes of Realms of Memory, word of mouth is always the best way to inform others. Please tell a friend or review us on your favorite podcast app. I'm Rick Didarian. See you soon.